I'm Harper Wynn. I'm 37 and I haven't slept in 4 days. My son, Eli, is 11, and he's lying unconscious in a burn unit in downtown Brooklyn with second and third degree burns across half his body. The fire was an accident. I was at the hospital pulling a double shift when the gas line under our kitchen stove ruptured. The whole apartment went up in under 5 minutes. My upstairs neighbor said she heard a pop, and by the time she looked out her window, black smoke was pouring through ours. Eli had been home alone, watching a robotics video and eating frozen pizza. He managed to crawl to the hallway before collapsing. If the firefighter hadn't pulled him out when he did, we'd be having a funeral. And somehow, while I'm here, sitting on this scratchy vinyl chair in a pediatric burn unit, watching my only child fight for his life, my own mother, Lorraine, called to ask if I'm still coming to Delaney's bridal shower on Sunday. I didn't answer right away. I thought maybe I'd misheard her. I was standing in the hallway outside Eli's room, trying to catch my breath after his dressing change. He'd screamed through the entire thing, doped up on morphine and still begging me not to let them touch him. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. "Mom," I said, barely holding it together. "He's in critical condition. He hasn't woken up. He's still on the vent." There was a pause on the line. Not a long one. Just long enough for me to hope she might say something human. Instead, she said, "I understand you're stressed, Harper, but this isn't the time to make everything about you. Delaney's day matters too." That sentence, those exact words, cracked something in me. I've spent most of my life being the wrong daughter. The too loud one. The too dark one. The one with opinions and baggage and a kid out of wedlock with a man my mother never fully acknowledged as Eli's father. Delaney, on the other hand, is everything Lorraine ever wanted. Blonde, symmetrical, a lifestyle blogger with 80,000 Instagram followers and a fiancé who runs a startup in Manhattan. Their wedding has been a year in the making. The bridal shower is being held at an event space in Soho that costs more than what I made last month working trauma shifts. I was supposed to be there on Sunday. I was even assigned a task: floral centerpieces and dessert coordination. Because apparently, even though I'm the family disappointment, I'm still expected to serve. I told her no. Not angrily, just no. And she said, "If you don't show up, Harper, don't be surprised if we start rethinking Eli's college account." I felt like I'd been slapped. Not because of the money itself, God knows I've never counted on it, but because she said "we," as if Delaney had any say over my son's future. As if the money they'd dangled all these years wasn't about Eli at all, but about control. I hung up without another word. Walked back into the burn unit on legs that felt like they didn't belong to me. Sat back down by Eli's bedside, just in time to watch his heart rate spike again as the nurses adjusted his sedation. And I whispered into his ear, "I'm right here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." I said it for him, but I think I said it for me too. Because something shifted in me after that call. Something final. I don't know what's going to happen with Eli. The doctors are hopeful but cautious. His skin will heal, they say. Eventually. But brain trauma? That's a wait and see. What I do know is this. I've spent my entire life bending to my mother's expectations, hiding parts of myself to make her comfortable, showing up even when it meant breaking myself in two. But not anymore. Not when my child needs every ounce of me. Not when I've seen what real pain looks like, what real love demands. The world we knew went up in flames last Thursday. And when the smoke clears, I won't be standing in the same place anymore. I wasn't always like this. There was a time I'd have shown up to that shower in Soho, wearing a borrowed dress and pretending nothing was wrong, just to avoid the fallout. There was a time I would have plastered on a smile while serving mimosas, knowing full well that my son was in pain. And I would have done it for one reason, because I was still chasing something I was never going to get. My mother's approval. Growing up in our house in Staten Island felt like living in someone else's photo album. Everything had to look perfect. The front lawn, the matching Easter dresses, the choreographed Christmas cards that got sent to 50 relatives, most of whom didn't even like us. Lorraine, my mother, was the curator of that image. She taught at a Catholic high school and carried herself like a nun with a Prada bag. She wasn't cruel in the way people imagine abusive mothers are. There were no beatings, no screaming matches, just a slow, cold erosion of identity. If I laughed too loudly at the dinner table, I got a look. If I brought home a drawing I was proud of, she'd tell me I should focus on math. When I got my first period, she handed me a tampon like she was passing a baton and said, "Don't embarrass yourself in front of boys." I learned early on that the best way to survive was to shrink. Delaney, on the other hand, never had to shrink. She was the daughter Lorraine wanted. Pretty in that clean, symmetrical way. Polished, apologetic. She played violin until senior year, even though she hated it. Got her teeth straightened in 6th grade. Dated the right kind of boys, the kind whose fathers owned dealerships or dental practices. When I told my mom I wanted to go to the Art Institute in Chicago, she laughed. Not mean, just dismissive. "You're not that good, Harper. Be realistic." I ended up going to a community college instead. Studied nursing because it was practical, and I knew she'd at least tolerate it. I got through it by working night shifts at a gas station and drawing portraits of customers on paper towels in the back room. It was during that time I met Eli's dad, Jordan. He was warm and fast-talking, with a poet's mouth and calloused hands. We weren't built to last. I knew that even then. But he made me feel seen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being compared to anyone. When I got pregnant, Lorraine didn't yell. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, holding her glass of Pinot Grigio like it was a gavel, and said, "You are 23 and unmarried, Harper. Do you think this is a good look?" That was the first time she made me feel like Eli was a mistake. It wouldn't be the last. She showed up at the hospital after I gave birth, stayed exactly 20 minutes, and then texted Delaney photos captioned, "Your nephew." No name, no warmth, just ownership. Still, I kept showing up. I let her pay for Eli's preschool with the college account she created under her name. I brought him to Thanksgiving dinners where he sat politely while she gushed about Delaney's home renovation or the gluten-free catering at her engagement party. I swallowed it all because I thought maybe, just maybe, if I kept playing the game, she'd see me again. But she never did. Not when Eli was 3 and had a febrile seizure in the middle of her backyard barbecue. She said, "I told you not to let him run around in the heat." Not when he got bullied in 3rd grade for his skin tone and curly hair. She said, "Maybe he should wear a hat more." And not now. Not while he's wrapped in gauze, breathing through a tube with skin that may never look the same again. That phone call last night, it wasn't just cruel. It was clarifying. It showed me that nothing I do will ever be enough for her because it never was about what I did. It was about who I am. And I don't fit her mold. I'm not Delaney. And for the first time in my life, I'm done apologizing for that. I sat by Eli's bed this morning, holding his bandaged hand while the nurse flushed his IV. The machines beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell. He was still sedated, but I talked to him anyway. I told him about the robot arm he'd been building for the science fair. I promised him we'd get new parts, maybe even better ones. I said, "You're doing great, baby. Mommy's right here." And then, like a sign, his fingers twitched. Just barely. Just enough to make my heart skip. The nurse saw it too and smiled. "He's fighting," she said softly. "He's still with you." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. So am I. By the next morning, I was running on coffee fumes, adrenaline, and raw instinct. Eli's fingers had moved. Twitched, really. But to me, it felt like a lifeline. It was the first sign that he was still in there, still fighting. I clung to that tiny motion like it was air. The nurse, Kelly, night shift, soft-spoken but firm, confirmed what I was almost too afraid to believe. "It's not uncommon during sedation tapering," she'd said gently. "But it's a good sign. Let's stay hopeful." I nodded, trying to act like I understood all of this. The truth? I barely understood my own thoughts. My body was in the room, but my brain had been running laps for days. Every beep of the monitors, every creak of the floor outside his room, it all went straight to my chest. That morning, while I was wiping Eli's forehead with a damp cloth, my phone lit up. It was her, Lorraine. The name alone made my stomach clench. I hadn't blocked her yet. Maybe I hadn't because some pathetic part of me still wanted her to show up and act like a mother for once. Or maybe I knew she wouldn't, and I needed that confirmation. The message was short. Delaney's in tears. The caterer canceled. I hope this makes you happy. No mention of Eli. No, how is my grandson? No, I'm thinking of you. Just drama, just guilt. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly, and besides, what was there to say? That my son had started breathing a little more on his own? That I hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days because the smell of food made me nauseous? That I still smelled smoke in my hair no matter how many times I showered? And then, 20 minutes later, she followed it up with, "You're throwing away everything we've given you." There it was. We. The illusion of family generosity that always came with strings. I turned off my phone. I sat in silence for a while after that. Just watching Eli. Watching his chest rise and fall. Slow and shallow. Every few minutes, he'd let out this soft, unconscious exhale that sounded like he was trying to speak underwater. I'd learned by then not to expect miracles all at once. The doctors kept repeating, brain trauma is slow. The body goes first. The mind follows. But that morning, something shifted in me. I started making a list. Not on paper. Just in my head. Every time Lorraine had called her control love. Every time she used money to keep me in place. Every time she treated Eli like a prop in her performance of grandmotherhood, but never as a person. When he was 4 and she told me I should straighten his hair so he fits in better. When she gave him a sweater for Christmas that was clearly 2 sizes too small and said, "Well, I thought he'd still be little." When she brought Delaney a new iPhone just for helping plan Thanksgiving, while Eli asked if we could keep our old cable box 1 more month because he liked watching the same cartoons again and again. It was all there, in a slow, rotting pile I'd tried to ignore for years. But now, sitting in that hospital chair, it felt like the scales had finally tipped. This wasn't just about a missed bridal shower anymore. It wasn't even about Eli's trust fund. It was about dignity. And I was done handing mine over just to be tolerated. Around noon, Dr. Levin, Eli's neurologist, came in with 2 residents. She pulled up his chart, reviewed his scan from that morning, and gave me a small, restrained smile. The swelling has continued to go down. His responses are still limited, but they're there. We're moving in the right direction. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "You should try to get some air today. Even 20 minutes. It helps." I nodded. I wasn't ready to leave. But I was starting to hear it now. The refrain that had echoed through every nurse's advice and every doctor's concerned glance. "You have to survive this too." So I asked Kelly, God bless that woman, if she'd sit with him while I grabbed a sandwich from the cafe downstairs. She agreed without hesitation, even offered to text me if anything changed. I walked down the hall, the floor under my shoes suddenly foreign and unsteady, like I hadn't been outside that room in months. And as I waited in line at the cafe, hands in my pockets, trying not to burst into tears for no reason, I caught a glimpse of myself in the refrigerated case door. Dark circles, hair thrown in a knot, hoodie that smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt plastic. But my eyes were clear. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I could see myself without her voice in the background telling me who I wasn't. And in that moment, I knew. The version of me that came into this hospital wouldn't be the one that walked out. I was still holding that awful turkey sandwich from the hospital cafe, half wrapped, barely touched, when the elevator dinged and the door to Eli's unit opened. And there she was, Lorraine Wynn, my mother, in a cream-colored coat that looked completely out of place next to the chipped linoleum and antiseptic smell of the pediatric burn unit. She stepped into the hallway like she belonged there, like she'd just come from some charity luncheon rather than skipping 4 straight days of her grandson's hospitalization. Behind her was Delaney, of course. Hair blown out, lip gloss perfect, holding a gift bag with gold tissue paper sticking out of the top. For what, I couldn't imagine. Burn recovery wasn't exactly a hallmark moment. I didn't move, just stood there, sandwich in hand, feeling the rage rise up from the soles of my feet like heat. Lorraine caught sight of me and gave a smile, a soft one, the kind you use when you're about to lie. "There you are," she said. "We've been trying to reach you." "I turned my phone off," I said. "Well," she exhaled, like I'd just confirmed her greatest suspicion. "We came as soon as we could." I let that sit between us. Let her feel the weight of those words bounce off the reality of what she hadn't done. Delaney stepped forward, voice sweet and measured. "How is he? Is he awake yet?" I ignored her, looked straight at my mother. "He opened his eyes this morning." Something flickered in her face. Relief, maybe, but it passed too fast to catch. She nodded, then said, "That's wonderful. I'm sure the doctors are doing everything they can." "The doctors," I repeated. "And me? I've been here every minute." "Of course," she said smoothly. "We never doubted that." It was that word, "we," that set me off. "You weren't here, Lorraine?" I snapped, not bothering to keep my voice down. "You didn't call the night he was wheeled into surgery. You didn't ask how he was doing when I told you he hadn't woken up. You texted me about cake and canceled catering, and now you show up with a gift bag like this is a baby shower?" Delaney looked like she wanted to disappear. Lorraine just straightened her posture. "I understand that you're under a lot of stress." "No," I cut in. "You don't understand anything. And you never have." I could feel my throat tighten, but I didn't stop. Not this time. "Do you know what it's like to sit beside your child, praying he lives, while the only family you have is asking you to arrange finger foods? Do you know what it's like to hold his hand through a skin graft while wondering if he'll ever walk again? And while I'm living it, not watching it on a screen. You threatened to pull his college money because I won't show up to a party." Lorraine's jaw clenched. That money was meant to support his future. I only meant— "No," I said again. "You meant to remind me that everything you give comes with strings." Delaney, trying to diffuse the tension, whispered, "Can we maybe talk about this somewhere else?" "I don't want to upset the nurses." I turned to her slowly. "Then don't come into my son's hospital like it's your PR opportunity. He's not part of your brand." She flinched. "Good." I took a breath, forced my voice back to calm. "You can visit him, but you get 5 minutes, one at a time. You smile, you say you've been praying, you keep it short, and you walk out. If either of you mentions a bridal shower, college funds, or how hard this has been on you, I swear to God, I will have security remove you." Lorraine's voice was a whisper now, but sharp enough to cut. "I am still your mother, Harper." "And I am his," I said, pointing toward Eli's room. "And that's the only thing that matters right now." There was a long, cold silence. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a manila envelope. "This was supposed to be your wedding gift," she said, as if that meant anything. "It's the trust paperwork. Do with it what you will." She didn't look at me as she walked away. Delaney hesitated. "I really didn't mean for things to get like this." "Things got like this because no one ever tells her no," I said. "You want to be different? Then be different." Delaney nodded quietly, and for the first time I saw something real pass through her expression. Maybe shame, maybe fear, maybe both. They left without another word. I slipped the envelope into my bag without opening it and went back to Eli's room. The machines beeped steady. His chest still moved shallow and slow. But his eyes opened again when I sat beside him, and he mouthed something soft through cracked lips. "Mom." I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." The envelope sat in my dresser drawer for weeks. I didn't touch it, didn't even glance at the handwriting. Just knowing it was there made me feel like something toxic had seeped into my home. Eli was discharged 26 days after the accident. He left the hospital with grafts across both legs, a compression suit he hated, and a limp that made other kids stare. But he also left with something else. A quiet resilience that hadn't been there before. He never complained. Not once. Not during the therapy sessions that left him sweating and pale. Not when we had to downsize apartments. Not when he missed the class trip to the science center because we couldn't afford it. He just kept moving forward. So did I. The manila envelope eventually came out of the drawer when our landlord served notice that he was selling the building. I needed to know what kind of options we had, and whether Lorraine's so-called gift had any weight left. Turns out it did. It was a revocable trust, set up under my name when Eli was born, with a balance that could have covered half his college tuition if it had stayed untouched. But it hadn't. Tucked inside the folder was a statement from 2 months ago. Lorraine had already liquidated most of it. Emergency redistribution. The paperwork read, $52,000 pulled from a trust meant for her grandson and redirected into a joint account with Delaney. No explanation. No permission. Just gone. I sat in our cramped kitchen and stared at the numbers until they blurred. Not because I was shocked, but because deep down I'd always known. The trust fund was never really Eli's. It was just another leash. But this time, I didn't cry. I made copies. Then I called a lawyer I knew from the hospital, someone who handled family mediation and trust disputes. I handed over the folder and said, I don't want revenge. I want closure. And I want my son's name off anything tied to hers. It took 3 months, 2 formal complaints, and 1 very uncomfortable subpoena. But in the end, the truth came out. Lorraine had pulled the money to pay for Delaney's pre-wedding expenses, venue deposits, dress fittings, private chef tastings, and a full spa retreat in upstate New York. She had even bought monogrammed robes for the bridesmaids with part of it. Robes, while Eli was relearning how to walk. The judge didn't mince words. She called it an unconscionable misuse of funds intended for a minor. Lorraine didn't face jail time. It wasn't that kind of case. But the trust was dissolved, the remainder turned over to me, and a formal complaint was filed with the family court registry. Her reputation, however? That didn't survive. Lorraine had built her life around appearances. Her church group, her charity board, her curated friendships that only existed in the glow of white wine and catered luncheons. And those people? They talked. I didn't leak anything. I didn't have to. All I did was not protect her anymore. When someone from her church called to ask why Eli's name had been removed from the youth scholarship list, I told the truth. Plainly. Gently. Fact by fact. It spread on its own. I heard she stepped down from 2 boards, that her ladies' luncheons were no longer quite as full, that even Delaney, when asked at her rescheduled wedding why her mother looked so strained, said, because she got caught. I didn't take pleasure in it. Not really, just peace. Eli and I eventually found a small duplex on the edge of Queens. Less space, less shine, but more ours. I started picking up freelance shifts in pediatric care and even reopened my old sketchbook. I sell portrait work now. Quietly. Mostly to other hospital moms who want to remember their kids before the surgeries, the treatments, the weight of it all. And Eli? He's 12 now. Still limping, still healing, but proud of every scar. Last week, he came home from school holding a C+ on a math quiz like it was a trophy. I didn't think I'd finish it, Mom, but I did. I stuck it to the fridge. He looked at it for a minute, then asked, "Are we still poor?" I smiled. Number were free. Sometimes the people who raised you will never love you the way you need, but that doesn't mean you have to keep shrinking just to fit inside their version of family. If you've ever had to walk away from someone to protect yourself, or your child, I'd love to hear how you found peace in that choice. Feel free to share below. And if this story sat heavy with you like it did for me, maybe stick around. There's more to tell.